Hey there guys, this is your host Richard. The very first season of Demon Slayer introduces us to the concept of 12 demon moons, known to be the strongest demons working under Muzan. It's soon established that the upper-ranked demon moons, who hold the positions from 1 to 6, are some of the strongest demons in the game, and even Hashiras haven't been able to defeat one for over a century. Although Season 1 doesn't introduce us to upper ranks, the subsequent seasons allow us to witness these 6 ridiculously powerful demons fighting in all their glory. Most of them appear as the primary antagonists in each arc and allow us to witness historic battles between them. Most of them appear as the primary antagonists in each arc and allow us to witness historic battles between them, the Hashiras, and the main cast. Each of them has their unique origin stories, fighting styles, and blood demon arts. Throughout the course of the story, however, we've seen more than 6 upper-ranked demons, with some positions being given to other demons, 2 demons sharing the same body, and 6 clones being manifested from one demon. In today's video, let's talk about every single upper-ranked demon we've seen. Also, beware of manga spoilers if you're anime only. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Upper Rank 1, Kokushibo. The strongest demon, barring Muzan himself, Kokushibo enjoyed the position of the Upper Rank 1 and for the longest time was the only demon who possessed a breathing technique. The gap in strength between him and his peers was huge and, like Tanjiro, was shown to possess a permanent mark. Due to his ridiculous strength and desperate desire to stay alive, Kokushibo was able to attain the miraculous feat of regrowing his own head after being decapitated. Ultimately, he fell in battle against the Stone Hashira, Gyome, Wind Hashira, Sanemi, Mist Hashira, Muichiro, and Sanemi's brother Genya. When human, Kokushibo was born as Michikatsu Tsukiguni, with his twin, Yoriichi. As twins were considered to be a bad omen, and with Yoriichi possessing an odd birthmark which held the reputation of taking one's life before the age of 25, the latter was made to grow up segregated from the family and destined to become a monk at the temple at the age of 10. Meanwhile, Michikatsu pursued his dream of being a samurai and took sword lessons. He was good to his twin, and even gifted him an untuned flute, which Yoriichi treasured deeply. Things began to shift when Yoriichi was revealed to have far more natural talent than him, despite not having had any training. He also went on to realize that his twin was a genius who could see through living beings, which sparked a dangerous envy within Michikatsu, especially considering how the father was likely to make Yoriichi the heir and segregate Michikatsu instead, since the former was the one with natural talent. Eventually, their mother passed away, and Yoriichi decided to leave the house before turning 10. He knew that their father wanted him to be the heir and was going to send Michikatsu away instead. To spare his twin the same fate, Yoriichi took the fall and carried the untuned flute with him. This made Michikatsu even more jealous, but he eventually grew to become a samurai. He even got married and had children, but a demon attack took everything away from him, only for Yoriichi to arrive and slay the demon with ease. This led to Michikatsu joining the Demon Slayer Corps, where he tried to emulate his brother's sun breathing. He failed at it, but eventually developed his very own moon breathing, which, although powerful, wasn't strong enough to put him in Yoriichi's league. He even developed a permanent Demon Slayer mark, which made him fear that he'd die early without ever being able to catch up to his brother. So, when Muzan offered him to become a demon, which would make him far stronger and prevent aging or deterioration of skill, Michikatsu took up the offer and became the upper rank one, known as Kokushibo. Due to his reddish hair, permanent Demon Slayer mark, and as the twin of the progenitor of sun breathing, Kokushibo's appearance in the anime raised some eyebrows as people tried to connect his identity with that of Tanjiro's. Since the Kamado family eventually inherited Yoriichi's sun breathing technique, using the flesh manipulation ability that demons tend to have, Kokushibo acquired 6 eyes so that he could counter Yoriichi. This can be attested by the fact that the Yoriichi Type 0 battle robot was made to have 6 arms to emulate Yoriichi's swordsmanship, as it was impossible to program his feats with the puppet having 2 arms due to his extreme proficiency. As a demon, he developed his blood demon art with his katana being made of his flesh, while the new abilities allowed him to manifest his moon breathing into reality. This art, known as the Crescent Moon Blades, amped his sword attacks with a flurry of bladed and chaotic crescent moons, the movement and directions of which he could control with ease in battle. These crescent-shaped blades appeared from his flesh katana. He used this blood demon art alongside his moon breathing and its forms as an amplification. Having lived for a ridiculously long time and being the only user of a breathing technique who got to live for centuries, that too in his physical prime, Kokushibo developed around 16 forms of moon breathing. What made Kokushibo's blood demon art so lethal was its unpredictability, as he could alter the direction and motion of the crescent blades at whim mid-attack, countering whatever defense his opponent was going to use. However, Kokushibo failed to suppress his brother even as a demon till the end of Yoriichi's life. At some point, he encountered an 85-year-old Yoriichi, who had outlived the curse of his mark and found his twin state as a demon to be pitiful. Yoriichi overpowered Kokushibo in battle once again, despite his age, while Yoriichi was a demon who hadn't aged a day since his transformation. In the end, Kokushibo witnessed Yoriichi die upright on the battlefield from natural causes, which made him even more furious. He kicked his corpse but found out that his brother still carried the untuned flute. Despite his hatred towards Yoriichi, Kokushibo was unable to flush his brother out of his system and took that flute with him, treasuring it. As a bearer of the Demon Slayer mark, Kokushibo could tap into the selfless state and get access to the transparent world. This is an ability Yoriichi possessed since childhood, due to being born with the mark. However, there was one drawback that came with the demon having the permanent mark. Someone of Kokushibo's level would only be engaged by Hashira-level Demon Slayers, since a permanent mark could resonate with Demon Slayers, provided the latter's heart rate hit 200 beats per minute and body temperature touched 39 degrees Celsius. Kokushibo's very presence would allow his opponent to awaken their Demon Slayer marks and immediately get stronger. And this is exactly what happened in the final battle, with the Wind Hashira acquiring his mark while the Mist and Stone Hashira already had it. During this final battle against Genya and 3 Hashiras, it took a lot of effort from his opposition and the deaths of Muichiro and Genya for Kokushibo to be beheaded. In fact, everyone had to activate the Demon Slayer marks and turn their Nichiren blades red, except Genya, of course. Even in the case of Genya, he had to consume Kokushibo's hair and part of his flesh katana to experience an intense amp in his powers, which allowed him to temporarily develop a blood demon art. This power Genya required from Kokushibo himself was used to restrain the upper rank 1, creating an opening for the Hashiras to behead him. However, Kokushibo was hell-bent on not dying before ever rivaling Yoriichi. His desperate desire to stay alive allowed him to regenerate his own head, and he took on a monstrous form. However, when he saw his reflection in the Wind Hashira's blade, he found himself to be pathetic, as he'd given up all sense of honor just for power and life, even when his true goal as a human was to be an honorable samurai. His head was smashed by Gyome once again, which led to a second attempt at regeneration. However, Kokushibo was suffering from an identity crisis in his state of limbo, which was fueled by his inferiority complex as he met Yoriichi once again in limbo. Seeing his twin's form and calm appearance, Kokushibo realized that a samurai is supposed to look honorable like Yoriichi, and not grotesque and monstrous like him. In the end, his body below his head disintegrated into dust as his regeneration was ruined by his identity crisis and envy towards his twin, bringing the life of the upper rank 1 to an end. Upper rank 2, Doma. The third strongest demon after Muzan and Kokushibo, Doma is an antagonist one really can't sympathize with. He lacks any sense of empathy, is rotten to the core, and takes pleasure in eating women. However, his cryokinetic abilities and combative powers, combined with his insanely fast regeneration, made him a dangerous foe to deal with. Born with polychromatic eyes, Doma was made to be the leader of the Eternal Paradise faith for the same, and worshipped by his parents and the cult's followers as a god. But he was always a sociopath and felt no emotions, so much so that he considered his followers to be stupid worms who begged him for mercy. At some point, his mother found out that his father had been cheating on her, which led to her murdering him and taking her own life. Such a tragedy would traumatize anyone. Doma, however, remained unfazed as he was incapable of love. At the same time, he himself had never experienced familial love from his parents, as they were too busy hailing him as a god. He was only bothered by the excess blood in the room and how it made the place stuffy. Unlike most of the other demons who transformed due to their unfortunate circumstances, Doma became a demon for no reason after he met Muzan at the age of 20. He took great pleasure in killing and eating humans, particularly women, and believed that he was doing a great deed as they could now live forever within him. At the same time, he continued to serve as the leader of his cult, but ensured that he had no more than 250 followers to avoid being discovered. With time, he rose up the ranks to become the upper rank 6. One day, he encountered the impoverished Guto and Daiki in their human forms in the entertainment district and offered them to become demons. As Guto accepted the proposal, Doma became responsible for creating the demons who would later become the upper rank 6. More than 80 years after that, Doma met Inosuke's mother, Kotoha Hashibara, who was being abused by her husband and mother-in-law, which led to her leaving her family with her baby son, Inosuke. Instead of devouring her, however, Doma provided sanctuary to Kotoha in his cult as he believed that she possessed a pure heart. But one day, she accidentally witnessed him eating his victims and tried to run away before he could explain. Doma knew that he had to eat her, as his secret was revealed, and chased after Kotoha, who threw her son into a river to protect him, leading to Inosuke being raised by a boar. Unfortunately, she ended up being devoured. After meeting Inosuke during the events of the story, he made fun of Kotoha's situation, calling her stupid and unlucky as she never experienced a single happy moment in her life. At some point, he was promoted to become the upper rank 2, following which he killed the insect Hashira's sister, the flower Hashira, Kanai Kocho, and eventually became her arch-nemesis. However, Doma never felt guilt for his heinous actions due to being clinically apathetic and misanthropic. After having encountered Kanai Kocho, she was able to see through his friendly facade and believed that he pretended to have emotions so that he himself would be able to feel as well. hell. He was also terribly nihilistic and believed that neither heaven nor hell existed. To him, people only believed in such concepts because they were weak and needed a coping mechanism, and he acquired this philosophy from his experience as the cult leader of the Eternal Paradise faith. However, the inability to feel made Doma stronger, allowing him to assess battles and situations calmly instead of being emotionally provoked. In terms of combat abilities, Doma was proficient in Tessenjutsu, a type of martial arts that utilized Japanese war fans. He was remarkably good at using it for both offense and defense in high-speed battles. He could generate massive gusts of wind by performing 8 to 9 attacks in a split second. However, what made his skill even more lethal was the fact that he combined his Tessenjutsu with his blood demon art, cryokinesis. This art allowed him to generate frost and ice from his demonic blood and flesh and manipulate it to the way he desired. He could make his victim inhale the ice as well, which damaged their lungs and made them incapable of breathing. Even without one having to inhale him, the remarkably low temperature of his ice could make his opponent feel like their lungs were about to burst, as noted by Shinobu when she fought Doma in the Infinity Castle. He could even create constructs such as ice clones of himself, frost lotuses, and so on. One of his strongest attacks would be the rhyme Water Lily Bodhisattva, which displayed a huge bodhisattva statue surrounded by ice lotuses made by Doma. It could generate huge gusts of icy wind from its mouth. Doma could also use cryokinesis to create extra appendages, but he mostly used it to enhance the gusts created by his Japanese war fans with ice and frost. His final battle took place against Shinobu Kocho, her apprentice Kanai Kocho, and Kotoha's son Inosuke, making it a very personal battle for all of the opponents. Shinobu was hit by his blood demon art Frozen Lotus, but she accidentally breathed the frosty air in, and it began to weaken her body, throwing her on the verge of death by deteriorating her lungs. She went on to use several of her poisons on Doma, and although he did take the hit at first, he managed to overcome them soon enough, which frustrated Shinobu. Despite Doma's inability to feel, he seemed to have acquired some form of twisted romantic love for Shinobu and embraced her in a bear hug to absorb her, as she mocked him for his efforts being a complete waste. Shinobu knew that Doma would try to absorb her, and she went into the battle with the intention of sacrificing herself. For this reason, she altered her own physiology, lacing every single cell of hers with wisteria, which was poisonous to demons. And although upper ranks would ideally be able to overcome poisons, Shinobu had laced her body with a dose 700 times her body weight, making herself a lethal dose of poison for any demon who would absorb her, irrespective of how strong the demon was, probably barring Muzan. Absorbing Shinobu went on to become Doma's biggest mistake, as his body had been weakened, allowing Inosuke and Kane to fight him. During his final moments, he created his bodhisattva statue as a last resort, allowing Kane to understand that it was Doma's last effort to protect himself. As a result, she used her flower-breathing final form, Equinoctial Vermilion Eye, to counter Doma's insane speed and break through the ice statue at the expense of her vision in one eye. She closed the gap between herself and Doma and tried to behead his head, but was initially incapable due to his durability. However, Doma's pitiful state allowed Inosuke to arrive at the spot and support Kane, giving her blades an extra dose of strength to behead him. Finally, Doma was defeated and his body disintegrated. While in the limbo between life and death, Doma spoke to Shinobu as it absorbed her, asking her to join him in hell and making his strange romantic feelings for her apparent. However, she called him a worthless bastard. Upper Rank 3, Aaza. The demon with the saddest backstory and the one we feel for the most, Aaza might have the best writing among all antagonists in the show. The Upper Rank 3 was introduced as a battle-crazy demon during the Mugen train arc. He forced Rengoku to become a demon to retain his skill for centuries, showing no compassion for the value of being human or mortal. Ultimately, killing the Flame Hashira led to Tanjiro and the audience developing a hatred for the demon who was so obsessed with strength. However, there was more to him that was shrouded in mystery and was eventually revealed in the Infinity Castle arc, where Tanjiro and Gyu Tomioka engaged him in battle. As a human, Aaza, formerly known as Hakuji, lived in the slums of Edo, which used to be Japan's capital. He committed crimes such as pickpocketing for the sake of money, as he was poor and had an extremely sick father who he needed to tend to. However, he'd get caught, and the magistrate even threatened to cut his arms off after the third time. That day, Hakuji returned home to learn that his father had killed himself, as he didn't wish to take medicine with stolen money and instead wanted his son to live a righteous life. Hakuji, being an adamant criminal, also led to him being banished from Edo, and he began to hate society for having been so unfair to him. At the same time, he possessed a great desire to be strong, as it'd help him in not getting caught. Enraged at society at large, he beat up 7 grown men with his bare hands and was eventually approached by a man named Kaizo, who was a master at the bare-handed Soryu martial arts. He was impressed by Hakuji's brute strength and took him in to train him. However, the dojo had no other students due to the neighboring Kenjutsu dojo wanting the same land. They'd even get into altercations with Kaizo, who would bare-handedly defeat everyone from the neighboring dojo, which led to them resenting the man. man. Meanwhile, Hakuji was tasked with taking care of Kaizo's sick daughter, Koyuki, a task he was too familiar with due to his experiences with his father. At the same time, he began to find purpose in the Soryu-style martial arts as he trained under Kaizo. With time, he once again had people he loved whom he wanted to protect and didn't wish to become a criminal once again. 3 years later, Kaizo offered Hakuji to take over his dojo and marry Koyuki. Hakuji promised Koyuki that he'd get stronger so that he could protect her for the rest of her life. However, in his absence, the weak-willed members of the Kenjutsu dojo poisoned the well and led to Koyuki and Kaizo's death. Hakuji had once again lost everything in life, in a situation where he couldn't even do anything with his strength. This led to him hating the weak, as the Kenshis were weaker than Kaizo, so they pulled dirty tricks like poisoning the well. Infuriated, he killed every member of the dojo with his bare hands, mangling their corpses, and was eventually spotted by Muzan, who offered him to become a part of his upper ranks. Finally, this led to Hakuji being reborn as the upper rank 3 Aaza, who didn't remember anything from his human life apart from the fact that he wished to get stronger and stronger and that he hated the weak, which led to the demon being a social Darwinist. Due to his love for Koyuki in his human life, Aaza was also averse to eating or harming women, even when he didn't remember his woman. In the Mugen Train arc, he fought the flame Hashira, Rengoku, and was unable to accept why the Hashira wouldn't wish to become a demon. He wanted him to be a demon so that he could stay strong forever without losing his skill due to aging. However, despite Rengoku's strength and valor, he lost to Aaza, and the demon left the scene at the nick of sunrise. With Soryu martial arts and masterful hand-to-hand combat as his basis, even as a demon, Aaza was extremely powerful, as his punches and kicks could create shockwaves and decimate an opponent on contact. This ability to combine physical attacks with shockwaves was Aaza's blood demon art, and it was known as destructive death. These shockwaves could be energy-like circular waves, invisible air pressure, a barrage of rapid shockwaves, or cannon-shaped spikes, depending on what form Aaza used to launch them. The ability to generate shockwaves also negates the drawbacks hand-to-hand fighters experience in mid-range or long-range combat. Aaza was also not averse to tricking his opponent into closing the gap between them using shockwaves as his decoy attack, and then landing the final blow when his target was close, which was the technique he used to land a fatal blow on Rengoku. However, destructive death wasn't the only trick Aaza had up his sleeve. He had an ability with which he could sense his opponent's fighting spirit and use it to perceive their next moves and attacks, allowing him to defend, attack, and counter effectively. This was known as his compass technique, and it was part of his blood demon art. One couldn't go against a fighter as lethal as Aaza without incredible fighting spirit and murderous intent, but it only helped him. The compass technique involves the manifestation of a compass needle with Aaza at the epicenter. As he senses his opponent's strength and attack, he uses the information provided by the compass needle to aim for his target's weak spots and vitals. Every subsequent hit made by Aaza using his martial arts is a guaranteed hit, as his opponent's vitals and Aaza's attacks operate like magnets attracted to each other, allowing the upper rank 3 to execute his moves with lethal accuracy. The higher the fighting spirit of his opponent, the greater the accuracy of Aaza's technique, which is why the battle between him and Rengoku was lost with the flame Hashira from the beginning due to his phenomenal fighting spirit. In his battle against Tanjiro during the Infinity Castle arc, Tanjiro was able to decipher how his attacks were attracted to his vitals like magnets. The Demon Slayer eventually closed off his spirit and senses to open his mind, which allowed him to access the transparent world and see through Aaza and his movements. Meanwhile, Aaza's compass needle became ineffective against Tanjiro as the latter's emotional state, and by extension, his fighting spirit, had been shut down. Ultimately, Tanjiro beheaded him fair and square after he accessed the transparent world, but like Kokushibo, Aaza didn't wish to die before getting stronger. In fact, the main purpose his compass needle served was to help him find a strong opponent. Now headless, Aaza was reluctant to let go as he entered a state of flashback in his mind where he told himself that he had to get stronger so that he could return home with the medicine his father needed. The desperation he felt as a human had been retained as a demon, and he began to regenerate his head while he got back his memories. With more than half of his head regenerated, however, he thought about how he failed to live the righteous life his father had asked of him, or how he tainted his master's Soryu-style martial arts, which was meant to protect others, but instead he used it to destroy and murder. Aaza realized that he shouldn't regenerate as he lost the battle fair and square. Ultimately, the ghosts of his past got to him as he saw Koyuki pleading with him to let go. Before Tanjiro or Gyu could do something about the regeneration, Aaza used his own attack to destroy his own body as he finally disintegrated, with Aaza deciding to go to hell like a man after having led a sinful life. Upper rank 4, Anangu. Anangu made his appearance during the Swordsmith Village arc and proved to be the most unusual demon we've ever seen, at least in terms of body composition. While we see the likes of the apathetic Doma and Muzan, who lacked emotions, well, mostly, Anangu found his strength in his feelings as he could form powerful clones to represent his emotions. In terms of appearance, Anangu looked far from formidable as he was a frail and skinny man who always cowered in fear. In his human life, he used to be a compulsive liar who never took accountability for his own actions and deflected the blame onto others by playing victim for the sake of garnering sympathy. He was also a heinous criminal who would steal from innocent people and murder others. Once he murdered someone for not possessing sympathy for him. He'd then play innocent after committing such crimes, one time pretending to be mentally unstable as he blamed his hands for murder instead of taking accountability. He even got married several times and had kids, but each time he believed that they mistreated him, so he killed his family. Long story short, he was a pathetic human being, but not only did he pretend to be a victim, he wholeheartedly believed that he was the victim. Eventually, he was sentenced to death by decapitation by the magistrate, and at that point, Anangu even lied about being blind. But the lie was caught and he was imprisoned as he awaited the day of his execution. During that period, Muzan found him and pretended to believe in his innocence as he offered him his help. Anangu took up Muzan's offer and was transformed into a demon. Having become powerful, Anangu escaped prison and killed the magistrate. Over the next 2 centuries, he developed a versatile and powerful blood demon art that allowed him to use the powerful emotions he'd felt throughout his human life to manifest clones. Each clone possessed different personalities to represent the emotion it was born from, and also had separate abilities, which ultimately allowed Anangu to become the upper rank 4. Each clone possessed strength comparable to that of an upper rank demon. He also took advantage of the fact that demon slayers would try to behead his clones and work his blood demon art accordingly. Beheading the primary form would cause the next 2 to rise up, and beheading those 2 clones would then cause the next 2 to be released. No matter how many times the clones were decapitated, Anangu would continue to survive if his main body was safe. Overall, there are 7 forms. The main body, Anangu, is a manifestation of fear. This body can alter its size at will and turn small enough to escape the naked eye. During the Swordsmith Village arc, Tanjiro used his sense of smell to track down the main body. This body is also extremely durable, as Tanjiro had a great deal of difficulty in beheading it with his Nichiren sword, even when the blade had turned bright red. However, as mentioned before, beheading it the first time is pointless, as this results in the release of his anger and pleasure clones, known as Sekido and Karaku respectively. As the main body, Anangu can control the other clones at will. However, this body itself doesn't engage in battle, as it's a manifestation of fear and is focused on avoiding and running away from pursuers. When it did engage in battle though, it took control over the last clone of resentment, Urami, and killed a group of swordsmiths. With that being said, let's talk about his clones. The first clone, Sekido, represents Anangu's anger. It's constantly angry and enraged, not just toward his opponents, but also towards the other clones. He was the leader of the other emotion clones and took charge of their critical decisions during battle. Sekido had 2 abilities. Number 1, he could generate electricity using his blood demon art as he stabbed his power staff onto the ground. The electricity was potent enough to make his targets lose consciousness or get paralyzed. Its wide range and wider area of effect allowed him to take out several opponents at once. However, it could be countered if his opponent used another clone of Anangu's as a shield, since the electricity couldn't pass through its own cells. Number 2, Sekido could force the next 3 emotions born from pleasure, sorrow, and joy to merge with him in order to create the emotion clone Zohakutan, who possessed the abilities of all 4 clones. The next emotion clone Karaku represented Anangu's pleasure. Laid back and relaxed in nature, Karaku saw the battle as a game and a fun activity, unlike the other clones who took their battles more seriously. His priority was to experience new things amidst battle, and he was even seen praising Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Genya as he fought them. At one point, Genya severed his neck with a gunshot, and Karaku showed his pleasure in experiencing such a thing, as he'd never been injured that way before. However, his personality led to the other clones, especially Sekido, getting annoyed by him. Karaku's blood demon art allowed him to generate strong gusts of wind as he used a maple-shaped Japanese fan or an uchiwa. These winds were strong enough to blow the mist Hashira away from the main action into a distant forest. It also left craters, leveled buildings, and could obviously knock demon slayers unconscious. However, the abilities also limited not to Karaku, but to his uchiwa, as Nezuko was able to emulate his powers when she used his fan. This means that it should be possible for another person to use Sekido's staff to generate lightning as well. The third emotion clone, Aizetsu, represents Anangu's sorrow, and as such is constantly in a negative and depressing mood. His detachment from the more hot-blooded emotions such as anger or joy allowed him to calmly analyze situations in battle and strategize to figure out his threats and opportunities and assess his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. This resulted in him finishing off his target with one swift motion when necessary, instead of toying with his food for fun. Aizetsu had the blood demon art of spear projection. He used a Japanese spear called Yari and used the weapon to project thrusting attacks across great distances, making him a long-range battle specialist like Karaku. Next up, we have Urogi, who's the manifestation of Anangu's joy and, as the name suggests, possesses a more positive and jovial personality. In a way, he was similar to Karaku, as he saw the battlefield as his playground and found great delight in his fight against Tanjiro. His blood demon art Sonic Scream allowed him to create powerful sound waves from his mouth. The sound waves were so strong that, having intercepted it, Tanjiro's eyes and nose began to bleed as he was stunned. Even with his body part severed, Urogi could manipulate the flesh of that part to form a mouth and generate a sonic scream, even if the part was a limb. However, the potency of the altered attack wasn't as high as the sound waves created by the clone's mouth. The fifth clone, Zohakutan, was a combination of Sekido, Karaku, Aizetsu, and Orogi, and the manifestation of Hantengu's hatred. Only Sekido could create it as the leader of the clones, which led to Zohakuten possessing Sekido's more evil and rageful personality. This clone was the smartest and the strongest of them all and had a penchant for foul-mouthing his opponents to mock and insult them. Zohakuten was also extremely loyal towards Muzan. Zohakuten's blood demon art of wood manipulation allowed him to generate wood made out of his flesh and blood. His body also had drums on his back, and he manipulated the wood to strike the drums. As the combination of the previous 4 emotion clones, he possessed the powers of lightning strikes, wind generation, spear thrust, and sonic blasts. In fact, each attack was far more potent when used by him instead of the other clones. Zohakuten had created a gigantic wood structure during his battle against the Love Hashira, with the structure possessing snake-like dragon heads. This could further be manipulated depending on what type of range Zohakuten required in battle. The wood in itself was extremely durable and could withstand sword slashes unless the slash came from someone as powerful as a Hashira. Due to being born of Zohakuten's demonic flesh and blood, cutting them down was pointless unless it was done for self-preservation, as it could simply regenerate. The final clone, Urami, represented Hantengu's resentment and, as a result, possessed the main body's delusional and hypocritical nature. When being pursued by Tanjiro, he asked the Demon Slayer to not hurt his weak and innocent self as he played victim. The resentment it bore was born from Hantengu resenting how he'd been punished for his crimes as a human. Unlike Hantengu, however, Urami grew aggressive and angry much more easily. In terms of abilities, he was seen using Orogi's sound waves. It's possible that he possessed the powers of all 4 clones as well. Ultimately, the upper rank 4 was defeated when Tanjiro used sun breathing to behead the main body while the Love Hashira engaged Zohakuten. Hantengu being beheaded led to Zohakuten disintegrating as well. Upper rank 4, Nakime. An ever-present demon who owns and controls the Infinity Castle, Nakime works directly under Muzan. She wasn't always an upper rank and acquired the position of the upper rank 4 following the death of Hantengu. She's extremely loyal to Muzan and follows his orders without a fault. However, she's rarely seen speaking, and her aloof nature results in her showing little emotion, if at all, barring her acknowledgement toward the Demon King and the fact that she's honored to be useful to him. As a human, Nakime used to be an obscure Baiwa musician, living from paycheck to paycheck. Her husband was addicted to gambling and used her money for his selfish reasons, ruining her life and financial situation even more. One particular night, Nakime had a performance and she always performed wearing her single kimono. However, she found out that her husband had gambled the garment away. Enraged, she killed him with a hammer and went on to perform wearing a tattered kimono. This made her the subject of flack and criticism from the crowd due to her shabby appearance. Her hands shook in nervousness as she just killed her husband, but the ensuing performance ended up being so marvelous that the audience were dumbstruck and pleaded for an encore. She was paid handsomely, but this led to an unusual situation where Nakime would feel the need to kill a person before her performance. One fine day, she found her target in Muzan and obviously failed in killing the Demon King. However, Muzan was impressed by how she'd managed to search him and offered her to become a demon. She accepted his proposal, became a demon, and quickly rose the ranks to become one of Muzan's most preferred servants. After rising the ranks to become the upper rank 4, Muzan probably gave her a high dose of his blood to make her strong enough to fill that position. This allowed her to acquire a new ability as she could create and detach eyeballs from her body. This helped her spy on others from afar and locate the positions of the Demon Slayers or Ubuyashiki's hidden mansion. She possesses the blood demon art of castle manipulation using her biwa. As she strums the biwa with a baki pick, she changes the infrastructure of the Infinity Castle. It's most likely that the biwa and baki she uses as a demon are made using her flesh and blood. In fact, the Infinity Castle has been created by Nakime using her blood demon art, with the castle being an extra-dimensional space of an immense scale. Because Nakime owns it, she's somewhat of a god within that space as she can manipulate and alter it at will. The castle possesses endless rooms, a garden, and corridors, while she controls its infrastructure as she sits in the center. Not only does this allow her to evade incoming attacks, as seen from her fight against the Love and Serpent Hashira, but she can also use it offensively, as she can turn the room into massive pillars that ram into her enemies. She can also throw wooden blocks and doors at them to prevent herself from being decapitated or to attack a target. She has her hair rooted to the wall near her seat to make her castle positioning more potent. However, she can't move from her spot as she does so. During the battle in the Infinity Castle, Obanai stated how her power was very frustrating to go against. Nakime can also create and spawn portals to transport people from outside the castle to inside. Such portals can be used to negate attacks, but it was mostly used by Nakime to transport the upper ranks and help Muzan move around Japan without being detected. All in all, she's not a great combatant, but her blood demon art makes it impossible for someone to land a blow on her, because she can control the space where the fight is taking place. This led to Mitsuri and Obanai, despite their skills, not being able to land a single scratch on her. Ultimately, the fight was handled when Tamayo's servant Yushiro planted his paper talisman on Nakime to take control over her vision and ability to control the castle. Upper Rank 5, Gyoko. Like Anangu, the Upper Rank 5 Gyoko was one of the main antagonists during the Swordsmith Village arc and was taken down by the mist Hashira Muichiro Tokito. He's notably known for his absurd physiology that resembles an ivory statue coming out of a vase like a nightmarish version of a genie. Instead of arms, he's shown to possess several tiny hands and his face looks like modern art gone wrong. In his battle form, he looks more like a merman, but once again a grotesque version of how you'd expect a merman to look. He's strangely attached to this far-centric and mutating art of his and hates it when someone possesses more passion towards their art than he does. When Muichiro mocked his art, Gyoko was visibly enraged and went on to call the Mist Hashira an ape for mocking the quality of his art. He was also jealous of the swordsmith Haganazuka, whose level of focus while polishing a sword amidst battle made Gyoko tremendously envious, and he went on to mutilate the swordsmith. His pathetic personality was supported by his obsessive loyalty towards Muzan, as he found pleasure in being decapitated by the Demon King. Prior to becoming a demon, Gyoko bore the name Managi as he lived in a coastal village. Living in a coastal village comes with emphasis on the occupation of fishing. When he was a kid, his parents had left the shores for a fishing trip but ended up drowning at sea. Sometime later, their corpses washed up on the shore, witnessing which led to Managi developing a taboo fascination with corpses. This became the basis for his art as a demon, being grotesque in his scaly skin in his mermanish form. As Managi, he'd even obsess over fish corpses, which led to the villagers believing that he'd gone insane. Naturally, they began to ostracize him and stopped engaging with the clearly unstable Managi. The situation got worse when a kid teased Managi for his behavior, which led to him killing the kid and stuffing his body in a pot that was normally used to keep fish after they were caught. Eventually, the kid's parents found out that Managi was the killer and stabbed him using a pronged fishing spear. His injuries were fatal, but he stayed alive for 12 hours, holding on to life by a thread, and was eventually discovered by Muzan, who turned him into a demon. As a demon, he shed his old name and began to go by the name Gyoko. The 12 hours he spent clinging on to life also led to Gyoko developing a hatred towards living things. Having been mocked by a kid, then killed by his parents as he'd murdered the boy in his human life, Gyoko would primarily eat children after becoming a demon. Demons in general have the ability to manipulate their flesh. Combined with Gyoko's grotesque obsessions with mangled corpses and fish carcasses, and having hailed from a coastal village, he began to mutate his body to resemble that of a fish. He'd then use his pots or vases created from his demonic flesh to abduct humans and turn them into his disgusting definition of art, as he'd make living statues with their bodies. What made it worse was the fact that not only were the bodies of the victims mangled, but they were, more often than not, continued to stay alive, making Gyoko's art far worse and more horrific than the living wax statues from the horror movie House of Wax. His shenanigans eventually led to him acquiring the position of the Upper Rank 5 among Muzan's 12 demon moons. Gyoko's blood demon art obviously revolved around his art and came to be known as the porcelain vase spells. He could spawn the vases anywhere in his vicinity and create several pots of various sizes all at once. He could also freely teleport from one pot to another, making a fight against him a complicated whack-a-mole game. This allowed him to travel far distances in extremely short periods of time and resulted in the demon not requiring legs. For the sake of his art, he'd abduct people, as we've mentioned before, but if the people didn't fit into his pots, he'd just compress his victims to make them fit. This way, he also managed to mangle them. One could say that he was a fisherman and humans were his fishes. To make matters worse, Gyoko could merge the people he trapped inside his pots, which is how he created a massive merged swordsmith during the Swordsmith Village arc. He even had control over how the merge would look, as it was part of his art, giving Gyoko complete creative liberty over the mangling of his living corpses. Gyoko could also spawn numerous fish-like mutations with pots on their backs. The fishes could be gigantic, and they could only be defeated if the pots were destroyed. Gyoko used them to terrorize the Swordsmith village, but the love Hashira Mitsuri was able to take down all the creations in one swift attack. What made the fishes unique was the fact that they all had their own characteristics, with some fishes having monstrous teeth, some having sharp claws, and others having several small humanoid legs, the way Gyoko's upper body could sprout small hands. Some could even sprout a barrage of poisonous needles or leave behind poison after being killed. They were strong enough to take down lower-ranking demon slayers, but not strong enough to resist a Hashira. These fishes sprouted from his pots and were part of his artwork. They were also non-sentient. At some point, Gyoko created fish monsters with appendages resembling scythes to break the focus of Haganazuka, who was diligently polishing a sword with a one-track mind due to his dedication to his craft, despite the surrounding chaos. The Upper Rank 5 could even summon octopus tentacles from his pots, which could destroy the surroundings or restrain his enemies. An aquatic-based blood demon art would obviously be incomplete without water manipulation. Gyoko could sprout water from his pots and use them with quite good versatility. He could create cannon-like water-based attacks with shaped water into high-pressure tendrils, and a high-pressure sprout of water is generally quite lethal as it's water pressure that's used to cut diamonds. One of his most notable water-based attacks would be the water prison pot. This technique was able to trap Muichiro Tokito inside it, with the Hashira already having been poisoned by Gyoko's needle-based attack, subsequently finding himself in a situation where he was breathless and stuck in the durable water pot. However, he was eventually able to break out of it and even developed his Demon Slayer mark, which made him too strong for the upper rank 5, ensuring that the Hashira could dodge and counter all of the demon's attacks, cutting through the octopus tendrils and the likes. This resulted in Gyoko revealing his merman-like scaly form, but Muichiro, continuing to be unimpressed by his artistic vision, enraged the demon. Ultimately, Muichiro used his mist breathing to shroud the area in a sea of mist and beheaded Gyoko. He tried very hard to stay alive and even regenerate, but the mist Hashira then cut up his head into several pieces. Out of energy and power, Gyoko finally disintegrated and hit the hay. Upper rank 6, Gyutaro and Daki. Despite all upper rank demons being unusual in their own ways, what makes Gyutaro and Daki special is how the siblings share a body, and together hold the position of the upper rank 6. However, the elder brother Gyutaro was the primary holder of the demon's body, and the two could split if Daki's head was cut off, allowing the normally dormant Gyutaro to emerge. When Gyutaro was normally inactive and within Daki, the latter operated in the entertainment district and was somewhat of a mass murderer. The nourishment Daki acquired from eating human flesh was passed down to Gyutaro too. Between the two of them, however, Gyutaro was stronger, and it was his strength that was responsible for their position among the 12 demon moons. Their shared biology also allowed Gyutaro to have control over Daki, as he was able to heal her burnt tissue and reattach her head after she was decapitated, which preceded Gyutaro's release. The two of them were engaged in battle during the entertainment district arc, with Tanjiro and the sound Hashira Tengen Uzui fighting Gyutaro, while Zenitsu and Inosuke fought Daki. They could only be killed when both siblings were decapitated at the same time, and their loss was the first victory the Demon Slayers had acquired against an upper rank in over a century. During their human lives, Gyutaro and Daki were impoverished as part of the lowest class in the entertainment district. Gyutaro worked as a debt collector in Yoshiwara's Rashomon riverbank. Daki, who was known as Ume, was too young to work but was renowned for her beauty from a young age. Gyutaro worked hard despite his circumstances to care for Daki after their mother became mentally unstable and eventually died. They were turned into a demon by Doma, who did so as a favor after seeing their despair due to their filthy, poverty-stricken lives. As demons, both siblings were cruel, with Gyutaro being more ruthless and petty as he was envious of those who had better lives than him. This was seen when he got jealous of Tengen, as unlike Gyutaro, Tengen was tall, handsome, and had 3 beautiful wives. He'd even harm himself out of jealousy and believed that to take from someone more fortunate than him was justified. Meanwhile, the beautiful Daki was sadistic, pompous, and extremely prideful. She toyed with her victims before eating them and expressed no guilt in doing so. She looked down on others and didn't wish to be engaged by demon slayers unless they were Hashiras, as she thought too highly of herself. She'd even killed and eaten 7 Hashiras in the past. Despite all of that, Gyutaro loved Daki dearly, even as a demon, when it was common for demons to forget their human lives. He was protective and caring of his sister, and allowed her to act however she wanted, even if it bothered him. Let's start with talking about Daki's unique abilities. She could manipulate her hair as part of a demon's flesh manipulation abilities. This allowed her to change the color of her hair from white to black, back and forth, and she could use it as a weapon to strangle a target. She possessed the blood demon art of obi sash manipulation. As an oiran, which refers to the highest ranking courtesan in Japan, Daki wore a kimono with an obi sash. This sash was created by Daki's blood demon art, and she could manipulate it at will, extending them and retracting them back into her body. The range of the extension and retraction was extremely high, and she could manipulate it to move in ridiculously high speeds, which led to Zenitsu engaging her, as he needed his speed from thunder breathing to keep up with its movements. The sash could also be manipulated into being as sharp as a Nichiren sword, making it the perfect long-range offensive weapon for Daki. It could cut through buildings easily and repel attacks by bending and weaving. Because she could control the hardness, Daki would use the sash as defense as well, wrapping herself in it to shield herself from attacks such as Tengen's explosives. She could also make it as soft as silk to make the sash difficult to cut for her opponent. Daki would often use the sash to hide humans she wanted to eat. She could transform the human into flat objects to store them. These people could only be freed if the sash was cut without harming the humans within, and they'd revert back to their original 3-dimensional forms. The greatest defense provided by the sash would be the fact that Daki could turn the flesh on her neck into a hardened sash to prevent herself from being decapitated. An unnatural ability of this blood demon art is how the sash could be made to be sentient. Daki would often add cognitive functions to her sash to monitor her food, capture people to gain information, and communicate amidst battle if she physically couldn't be present in the immediate vicinity of her opponent. The independent sashes she created possessed part of her power, the magnitude of which differed based on the function Daki required each sash to perform. Once the sash returned to her body, the power came back to her as well. Now, let's discuss Gyutaro's abilities. He could detach his core from his body and transform it to make it adopt the form of his right eye. In the Entertainment District arc, we see him implant this eye on Daki's Daki's forehead, subsequently strengthening her abilities and acquiring a psychic connection with her. This connection allowed him to see, sense, and hear everything that Daki experienced. He could even control her body if need be and coordinate their attacks. When it came to a demon's ability to manipulate flesh, Gyutaro could firstly turn his neck backwards. He could transform his flesh into a pair of sharp kamas, which are Japanese sickles. His flesh and blood also made the kamas poisonous. Once he was shown to control it telekinetically, making the weapons return to him like boomerangs. During his fight against Tengen and Tanjiro, he was stabbed by the blades of the demon slayers and used his kamas to infect their swords to stop them from being able to pull out their blades. Gyutaro's blood demon art was a straightforward blood manipulation, as he could release blood from his veins or open wounds voluntarily. He could use his kamas to release blood as well, and due to his regenerative abilities as a demon, he'd never run out of blood and heal the open wounds he'd created. He used his blood in a similar fashion to Daki's obi-sash in a way. He could make his blood sickle-shaped and as sharp as blades on solidifying its state from liquid. He'd then make the blood travel at immense speed for his offense-based attacks. Like Daki and Asash, he controlled the movement of the blood. What made his blood manipulation better than his sister's obi-sash manipulation was that he could change the shape of the blood at will. His blood also had deadly poison, which had resulted in Tengen and Tanjiro being infected. Blood manipulation could be used to create a durable dome around Gyutaro for the sake of defense. While Daki's obi-sash could slice through buildings, Gyutaro could decimate his surroundings by creating a razor-sharp blood tornado with his abilities. After a long battle, the siblings were decapitated at the same time, which led to us seeing Gyutaro's final thoughts. He showed no regrets in his life choices with respect to becoming a demon and eating humans. However, his love for Daki led to him regretting how his negative influence had turned her into a selfish person. He even wondered if she could have lived a different and a better life if he wasn't her brother and didn't cause her to turn into a demon. After all, she was known for her beauty, and maybe that would have helped her in life. Upper rank 6, Kaigaku. And finally, we have the demon Kaigaku, whose existence as a human has been too personal to two important characters, Zenitsu and the stone Hashira Gyome Himejima. He became part of the 12 Kazuki, holding the position of the upper rank 6 following the deaths of Gyutaro and Daki. He was allegedly one of the orphans living in the same temple as Gyome. The location was prone to demon attacks, and the kids were restricted from going too far post-sunset. One day, he was caught stealing the temple money and was chased out at night when he ended up being intercepted by a demon. Cowardly and selfish, he ratted out the location of the others in the temple to save himself and put down the wisteria incense Gyome would burn to keep demons at bay. Naturally, most of the other orphan kids died, and it also changed the course of Gyome's life, with a misunderstanding leading to people thinking that he'd killed everyone, which led to him being incarcerated and almost executed. Meanwhile, Kaigaku was taken in by the former Thunder Hashira, Jigoro, who trained Zenitsu as well, making him and Zenitsu acquainted with one another. The two trained together, and Kaigaku acquired the new goal to succeed Jigoro and become the next Thunder Hashira. While Zenitsu had only managed to master the first form of thunder breathing, Kaigaku failed to do so. Instead, he got a hang of the succeeding forms but without the basics down. It was said that his proficiency in the other forms wouldn't amount to much. He eventually became a demon slayer but didn't possess the will to protect people or even kill demons. He just cared about himself and was quick to surrender against a stronger opponent. He was even pathetic toward Jigoro, who wanted both Kaigaku and Zenitsu to succeed him, and he was repulsed by this because he didn't wish to be put in the same category with someone as timid as Zenitsu. He considered those who thought lowly of him to be evil and wrong, while those who considered him to be worthy were right. This was all due to the fact that he was extremely egoistic and self-absorbed, fitting the textbook definition of a narcissist who considered himself to be gifted and put others down. During the events of the Hashira training arc, Kaigaku came face to face with the upper rank one, Kokushibo. Of course, the latter was way stronger, and Kaigaku, being Kaigaku, surrendered and took up the offer to become a demon. He ate numerous people in the small period he spent as a demon and grew strong enough to acquire the position of the upper rank 6. Meanwhile, news reached Jigoro, and after finding out that his student had willingly become a demon, he committed seppuku, which is the act of cutting one's own belly with a short sword or knife and was performed by samurais in Japanese culture for an honorable death. Jigoro committed seppuku as he felt guilty for his apprentice becoming a demon. This act also caused a slow and agonizing death, but someone present at the scene would normally strike down the person after they cut their own belly to give them an easier, quicker death. For Jigoro, however, there was no one, which led to him dying slowly, painfully, and alone. Zenitsu eventually found out about it, which made him resent Kaigaku, not just because he was a demon now, but because his actions had led to Jigoro taking his own life in a painful way. As a demon, Kaigaku retained his swordsmanship, and although he wasn't as proficient as Kokushibo, he was good enough to aim to be the next Thunder Hashira. This also allowed him to be the second demon who possessed a breathing technique, with Kaigaku being able to perform the thunder breathing. He developed the blood demon art of electrokinesis, based on breathing style. First and foremost, it manifested his metaphysical thunder breathing into reality, allowing him to generate and manipulate actual lightning from his flesh and demonic blood. The lightning he created was black in color, and as it would hit a target, the lightning would crack the flesh and burn it. Previously, other demon slayers spoke about how his inability to perform the first form, thunder thunderclap and flash would affect the overall potency of his other forms. However, the addition of the blood demon art made up for that drawback. As narratively intended, Kagaku and Zenitsu fought one another during the battle at the Infinity Castle. The emotional value caused a lot of back and forth between the former senior and junior, with Kagaku mocking Zenitsu and the latter insulting him as if he was scum, which, let's be real, he was. Ultimately, Zenitsu was able to anger and behead Kagaku with one single attack of the 7th form of thunder breathing, which Zenitsu himself had created. The dying Kagaku couldn't stomach the fact that someone he considered weaker had created his own attack. Although he believed that Zenitsu was on the verge of death as well, which would make their battle a draw, the Demon Slayer was saved by Yushiro. Meanwhile, Kagaku died alone, screaming, making him go out with the knowledge that he was nothing but a sore loser. With this, today's video comes to an end. Did you like it? Share all of your thoughts with us in the comments. Till then, see you and have a great day.